morning and welcome to another edition of On the Whistle. Sorry for the slightly unusual setup. I was going to wait until I got home to Sunderland later today, but I thought after his 2-1 stoppage time win at Stamford Bridge, I thought people are going to want to have the latest episode in time for their Sunday morning cuppa. So yeah, I've done my best to do with the setup, so hopefully you can hear and see me all right. Well, an amazing result for Sunderland, clearly the best of the season so far, and I think mainly because it's one thing to win away at Chelsea, to win at Stamford Bridge, but I thought the most incredible thing about this performance and this result really was that it was one that Sunderland deserved on balance of play. So you can look at it over the course of the 90 minutes and say Chelsea dominated possession, but it wasn't as if Sunderland just put 10 men behind the ball and nicked it on the break at the end. I actually thought over the course of the 90 minutes they had a really, really good balance in terms of, yes, they defended at times in a low block and they defended really resolutely and they did the things they had to do to protect the box. But I thought throughout the game they had a really nice balance and actually having ways of getting up the pitch and ways of relieving the pressure. And you know, when I debrief the game, I kind of want to start at the end because there's so much good stuff in the winning goal. A huge moment for Brian Broby really to kind of announce himself as a Sunderland player. And a goal from Chemsdine Talbi, which I think we all feel has kind of been coming. He's been getting better and better, especially off the left wing. But I thought, for me, what summed up this start of the season that Sunderland have had better than anything really was Lutsharel Geertruida, who's coming on loan from RB Leipzig, playing at a really, really high level in Europe. He's had to wait for his opportunity to get in the team. He's had to kind of settle for a couple of minutes here and there off the bench. Excellent performance, plays an outstanding pass over the top, and then somehow finds the energy and the drive to make that run all the way up the pitch. And then when the goal goes in, the fact that he finds another little bit of energy to run the last 10-15 metres to celebrate with the fans, I thought it was a great moment because for me it just summed up what's been kind of so impressive about this team in terms of not just the quality, which was there for all to see again yesterday, but the unity they have and the way that these players have bought into the project and how driven they are, which I think is amazing when in many cases they're kind of switching European football for what should have been a relegation battle. At the moment, we don't want to get too carried away, but it looks like it might be something a little bit more than that. But I thought Geertruida's kind of run and his little bit of energy he found to celebrate with the fans, I thought kind of summed up the day really and summed up Sunderland's performance. I think it's a day where you have to give massive credit to Régis Lebris because I spoke before about Sunderland not just defending on the edge of their own 6-yard box and inviting pressure. I thought his little tactical tweak was inspired really. On another day, it could have been a little bit of a disaster because in the first 10 minutes, while I thought Sunderland were actually a real threat, they caused Chelsea, especially with their high press and some problems. They left a lot of gaps and it was clear that they were struggling to get to grips with this formation. To be fair, I think everyone was wondering when the team came out what the formation was going to be. I don't know if any of you saw it, possibly on Saturday, but when Sky put the graphic out for what they thought the team was going to be, they had Mukiele right wing back, Trey Hume left wing back. So who did that leave them with? Ballard, Geertruida and Reinildo in the back three. And I was thinking, that can't be right, can it? I wondered if someone had maybe given them a tip-off. And then obviously you had this kind of hybrid formation where Trey Hume was pushing into midfield when Sunderland had the ball and then kind of snapping back into wing back when Sunderland lost it. And for sure, in the first 10 minutes, Sunderland at times looked a little bit all over the place. That's obviously where the first goal comes in. Realistically, I think Robin Rush should do a bit better as well, but he did redeem himself with an excellent save from Garnacho in the half. It's one of those where at the time it looks as if it's just straight at him and hit him when Garnacho meets the flick on at the back post. But actually, when you look at it back, Rush has done really well to get his cross the line and anticipate the shot, so a really good save. But I thought after the first 10-15 minutes, I thought Sunderland settled into it really well. And getting that extra player into midfield meant that they actually weren't just coughing possession straight back up as soon as they got it. They actually had an outlet and a way of getting up the pitch, which I thought was a really impressive kind of tactical tweak. And I think one of the most encouraging things about today is I think Sunderland can take a lot away from it in terms of, regardless of the result, I think they've found a way to show that they can compete in these scenarios where you're playing against really good teams who have a lot of the ball. I thought the second half was a similar story really. I think Chelsea were probably more dominant in terms of possession and territory, and yet they were less threatening. I'm trying to think back over the course of the half, and I'm really struggling to think of Chelsea creating any real significant opportunities. The vast majority of their efforts were long range from outside the box through Enzo Fernandez, through Garnacho before he went off. And I think that you saw Maresca make a lot of changes and not really get anywhere with them, and I think that's a testament to how strongly Sunderland defended. Pedro Neto switched flanks at one point because he wasn't getting anything out of Reinildo. Estevao came on, didn't make much of an impact up against Reinildo, who I thought was terrific on his return to the starting 11. I gave my man the match a 9 out of 10 performance. I thought he was just so composed, made such good decisions, really good in the air, which was crucial because in the end, because of the way that Sunderland were defending their box really well, Chelsea were kind of forced into play, putting a lot of crosses into the box in the second half, which Sunderland dealt with really easily, and Reinildo was part of that. So yeah, it was a really, really strong performance. I thought that one of the big things in the second half, really, I was really, really surprised. I don't know whether it's because he's a young player and there's some kind of management going on there, but I felt yesterday, I genuinely felt like I'd seen a massive new talent in football in Josh Ashampong, the Chelsea centre-half. I thought he was, for the time he was on the pitch, absolutely magnificent. His speed, his anticipation, his composure. There was that moment in the second half where it looked like Isidore was going to break through, and Ashampong just from nowhere just swept up the danger. And I think you could see that Chelsea's backline was really disrupted when he went off, and Toshin came on. And that obviously, in part, is what leads to Sunderland's second goal. So if that was tactical from Maresca, I thought that was a pretty major misstep. I don't know whether there was whether he's carrying a knock or whether there's any other aspect in that. But I did want to shout out that, one of the nice things about being in the Premier League is seeing these top players from other clubs. And Ashampong at 19, to me, looks like someone who's going to have an absolutely massive future in the game. It was an absolute pleasure to watch him play. But you could put a lot of Sunderland players in there. He had a fantastic game. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to shout out in the game was that I think having got his team selection right, having coped with the loss of Alderete, I thought Labrice's subs were absolutely inch perfect for the scenario of the game. Broby's hold-up play was excellent. Labrice has said loads that he's confident he'll make an impact in time. Obviously, what he's seen on the training pitch has given him the confidence that he was ready to come on and make an impact, and boy, did he do that. Chris Rigg on the right was a really good selection. I thought Chris had a really good game when he came off the bench. Really mature, used his energy to get up the pitch, but kind of looked after the ball well and helped Sunderland having someone out on the wing who was really comfortable in the ball and receiving the ball. Quite often in tight spaces, I thought he helped get up the pitch. And Talbi, I thought, if you look at that left flank, it was just a masterclass in management. Enzo had a brilliant game. Wasn't one that will kind of show on the highlights reels because a lot of the work he had to do was going back towards his own goal, but Reece James was so quiet in the game. The only time I can think of Reece James really having an impact was just from set pieces when he put some dangerous deliveries in. And that was because of Lefay's appetite to track back, and he was really good on the ball as well when he had it, in terms of at times slowing the game down, at times opening Chelsea up. That was a brilliant pass over the top for Granit Xhaka before the second goal. And of course it was Ashampong who was covering him and made the block from Xhaka's shot again. But yeah, Lefay kind of put in a huge shift and then identifying the right moment to bring Talbi's extra energy on him. And I think most of us, we've all kind of felt that's been coming for Talbi because he's been performing so well of late and getting better and better. And I think he looks like, to me, like a really top prospect at the moment, playing off the left. So a really kind of famous win, and I think one of the moments that will stick with me most from yesterday, even aside from the winner, of course, was, I think it was about 80 minutes in, and Lefay and Trey Hume were pressing, making challenges, and you could just hear the away fans getting louder and louder, and Sunderland just the players almost getting giddy, just crashing into challenges, getting up the pitch. And you could feel that, I'm not saying you could feel that Sunderland were going to win the game at that point, obviously you couldn't tell, and Chelsea were kind of dominating possession, but just feeling that confidence growing, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well in the away end. It was a really kind of great moment. I do feel it kind of sparked Sunderland again into life for the last 10 minutes. So yeah, one of those magic days really that you've just got to treasure, especially given some of the ones that we've had over the years. But as I say, I think the most important thing for me is that this wasn't a smash and grab. This is a performance that is repeatable. It's a game plan that was well designed to play against a team that's good in possession away from home. And I think that was summed up by the fact that I've not double checked today whether it's changed, but at full time, the initial XG measurements had Sunderland at about 1.1, 1.2, and Chelsea about 0.9. So that just shows you that this wasn't just sheer luck, that Sunderland were more in the match for Chelsea and were finding ways to hurt the opposition, not just from set pieces either. You know, the second goal doesn't come from a set piece. Xhaka's big chance in the second half doesn't come from a set piece. Set pieces were a massive part of it, obviously, with long throws getting someone back into the game initially. But actually, they were tidy at times in possession here. So I think that we can take aside from the 3 points, which were obviously massive at the start of this tougher run of fixtures, and putting Sunderland on to 17 and increasing that gap to the bottom 3. There's a lot to take away from this performance. So let's have a look at some questions and comments. We've got one from John here who says, how did we manage to get Siddiqui? He is some player. Yeah, it's a great question. I think what we're seeing at the moment is that Sunderland have been rewarded for, and maybe a little bit out of necessity as a promoted team, they're probably being rewarded for being a bit braver and a bit more decisive, especially in the early stages of the transfer market. You know, maybe Robin Ruffs is a similar one where teams are maybe a little bit reluctant to take a risk on a player who hadn't had loads and loads of exposure to top level European football. Maybe some teams will have felt that they weren't quite sure whether Siddiqui could go straight into a Premier League starting 11 from the Belgian league. I'm not sure. But, you know, I think Sunderland were really, really decisive. The one thing I would say about Siddiqui as well is that, John, is that Siddiqui's been on the radar for a long time. So this isn't kind of a signing that came up sort of later in the window or a player that someone didn't know much about, who they looked at and then started to really like. He is actually one of the players who, like the club's internal recruitment, had flagged up for quite a period of time as a potentially perfect Sunderland player. So I think when Siddiqui was available and when Sunderland got promoted, I think they were in a really strong position on that one to move quickly. So I think that's absolute credit really to the preparation that had been done even before this summer, even before the arrival, for example, of a Florent Gasolfi. So I think that has really helped. I thought Siddiqui was terrific. I thought the first half in particular, he was outstanding. Really embodied what I was saying before in terms of loads of work rate, low defensive position and really good breaking up play. But I actually think Siddiqui is already improving on the ball, and I think you could see that in the way he used the ball in the first half to relieve pressure. So a fantastic signing from Sunderland, and certainly in the first half, one of his best performances yet. It's not in his second half performance, he was very good. I just felt in the first half I was particularly impressed with his use of the ball. David says, superb performance today. Do you feel more confident now that we can do more than just stay up? Yeah, I think you have to be confident at this point. You know, 2 defeats from 9, 17 points on the board, and as I said, the thing that really struck me today was the performance level to actually match Chelsea. I think that feels like a pretty huge step forward for Sunderland. I'm not getting too carried away just in terms of all the things we've mentioned, the tough fixtures coming up, the African Cup of Nations, you know, all of those kind of things. And as the season goes on, you know, will the opposition start to kind of wise up to Sunderland a little bit? Will it become harder as teams get to know more what to expect at the moment, and that element of surprise goes almost? Possibly. So I'm not getting too carried away, but I have to say, sitting right here, I do feel quite confident that, yeah, Sunderland can do more than just stay up. The level of performance, the depth in the squad yesterday is a perfect example of that. You lose a really good player in Alderete who's performing well. Reinildo comes back in, Geertruida comes back in, and what a find he looks. So I am feeling pretty confident, to be honest, at the moment that Sunderland can potentially be a mid-table team this season. But I do think it's one where they need to produce such a high level of performance every week. The indications are at the moment that they can probably do that. But let's see how it goes. So Chris says, what a performance from team and fans alike. It just shows with excellent recruitment, firm identity, great coaching, fantastic leadership, and a togetherness and work ethic, you can make waves even at the top levels of the game. Yeah, great comment. Completely agree. I think what I love about this team is how quickly it's forged an identity and how quickly the fans have bought into it. Hopefully I got that across a little bit when I was talking before about that moment around the 80th minute where the challenges were going in and Sunderland were pressing. And honestly, all you could hear was kind of the Sunderland away end in Stamford Bridge. I love this identity. Sunderland have got so aggressive, so kind of resilient, tough. You can tell the opposition hates playing against them, and I think that's a great quality in a Sunderland team. And again, players coming into the team reinforcing that. Geertruida, like, already looks like a Sunderland player when we think about the identity of this team. He's worked so hard, really down to earth, but he's aggressive, he's physical, he gets in the opposition face. So yeah, I think it's a real credit to how Sunderland have built this team with such a clear vision. Top Nosh says, is it too soon to talk about a statue for RLB? Here's a thought, why don't we name a bridge after him? That's my suggestion. We've got a couple here on, Chemsdine Talbi. So Tony says Talbi has to start, and then the Adventures of Mr. and Mrs. Easted, kind of similar, says, oh, sorry, that wasn't your question, Mr. and Mrs. Easted. Yes, it was. Is Talbi the perfect sub for Lebris? Can play either side, can be used in attack or defence, can fit many formations. Think we've seen the best of him on the left side. Well, I totally agree that we've seen the best of him on the left side, and this is something that Lebris talked about with Talbi last week in praising his versatility, which you quite rightly mentioned there. I think at the moment he is slightly being the victim of his own success, and that because he looks so much more confident and decisive off the left, he's almost played his way into a substitute role, because I think it's really difficult to leave Enzo out at the moment. As I mentioned, Enzo, he's bringing you bits of quality on the ball, but he's bringing you so much good stuff out of possession, and he's so integral to the way Sunderland are playing at the moment, that I think it's almost impossible to leave him out of the 11. And I think Talbi, therefore, is such a good replacement for the last 20-25 minutes of games at the moment. Might be a little bit frustrating for him, because he'll feel like he's playing his best football since he arrived at the club, and yet he's dropped to the bench. But I honestly don't think it's the worst thing in the world for him right now. I think he's making a real impact off the bench. You can see he's growing in confidence, and he's a really good impact sub for Lebris. So, yeah, I imagine he might be a little bit frustrated in some ways, but I think his time is coming. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's a bit of a strange quirk in the squad at the moment, and there's kind of an overload of players kind of on the left-hand side and that vacancy on the right. Traore obviously starting again yesterday, so that's a bit of an odd one in some ways, but I think Talbi should feel really, really positive and confident about where his Sunderland career is going. His trajectory is really, really kind of flying upwards. But at the moment, I have to say that I agree in that I think he's a perfect impact sub, and I think that's okay for a player of his age and experience. I think the blend of Lefay and then Talbi off the bench is a nice one, similar to the way that I think it's working really well with Isidore, who's doing brilliantly up front, kind of running himself into the ground, comes off, and then you've got either Mayenda or Broby coming on. I think at the moment there's almost like an alchemy there that works really well. So Tony also said, Dan Ballard playing some exquisite football, agreed, dominated Marquis yesterday. The Premier League's got a lot more direct, a lot more physical since the last time we were in this league, and feels like Ballard's having a real moment. He's kind of perfect for the way the game's changing at the moment. And Tony also says, so good to have Reinildo back. He's huge for us. Yep, he was excellent yesterday. Is the back five here to stay? I'm going to bring a couple more in on this one. Michael says, what team formation we play against Everton then if Alderete is fit? Lebris has a lot to think about again in a good way. And I think I had another one along those lines. Yeah, Ian says, RLB masterclass. Agree with that. Seem to ask the same type of question every week now. How does Alderete get back in the team? I literally have no answer for this one, because I think Sunderland have 6 outstanding defenders at the moment, both in terms of ability and form. As I say, we had that debate in the week about Reinildo coming back into the starting 11, and my view kind of was, well, if you switch to a back 5, then great, but if you stick with a back 4, then the other 4 played so well against Wolves that I don't think it's fair to bring Reinildo in. Opportunity kind of came from Reinildo, and he was properly top draw, and I think probably again, has now made that left back or left wing back spot his own, kind of going into the Everton game. Trey Hume has been so consistent all season. Nori, you cannot drop. Dan Ballard at the moment, you cannot drop. And what a performance from Geertruida. So it's a really difficult one. I mean, my feeling is that probably it's one of those where it makes your decision quite easy for you in terms of why take any risks with Alderete if he's not 100% against Everton. Lebris did say they hoped he would be fit for the game, but they'd have to kind of wait and see. Well, if there's any doubt whatsoever, maybe you can just be a little bit cautious with Alderete and have him there if you need him off the bench and just kind of work it that way. I definitely think the back 5 is here to stay in these types of games. I think he'll use it less at home, to be honest. I think he still will want to stick with that 4-3-3 structure, and that leaves him with some difficult decisions. So yeah, my instinct for the Everton game is that maybe Alderete will just kind of be eased back in from the bench, and maybe Geertruida might have a little bit of a frustrating one if he has to drop to the bench. That's a really difficult decision. That we'll speak about that on the Raw Pod, I think, a bit more. Maybe he could come into midfield. Maybe that's a way around it in a 4-3-3. So that's going to be a really interesting one to see. But yes, I don't think the back 5 is going to be Sunderland's permanent formation, I guess, is my answer to that. But I definitely think it's something we'll see them use a lot this season, especially this kind of hybrid one that's a back 5 out of possession. Stephen says, if Sunderland still played no hard games. And Andy says, does winning this game mean we will no longer be flying under the radar? We haven't been taken that seriously by many pundits. We just get grouped into the promoted teams. Yeah, I think this is definitely, people will start to view Sunderland very differently now, because there is that feeling that they haven't played any one kind of thing, and the fixtures have been really kind. By and large, the fixtures have been kind, and I think the Breeze would be the first to say that that's enabled Sunderland to build the confidence and the belief that enables them to play the way they did yesterday. So that's been part of the story, but obviously all of us who've been watching the team have seen that there's a lot more going on here, and this win kind of underlined that. And so, yeah, people are definitely going to start seeing Sunderland a lot differently now, and I think they'll start to get a lot more attention. And that'll be a new challenge for the team as well, is that, you know, they're not going to surprise anybody anymore in terms of the opposition. So that's something that they're going to have to deal with as well. But yeah, I think people will start to acknowledge now that, you know, this isn't a fluke or a bit of luck. This is a proper team with a strong identity and really, really good quality as well. Yeah, Shiny Tom says, fantastic performance and result. How good is Regis in relation to formation and in-game substitutions? His preparation and eye detail are excellent, and massive kudos to the owners delivering on their promises. Will Regis be on other clubs' radar now? He definitely will be. I mean, he signed a new contract in the summer, and I think he loves it at Sunderland and is really enjoying working with this group of players. So I'm not overly concerned about that, but he will definitely start becoming onto other clubs' radars now, because of the level of performances that he's producing from this team. I mentioned those substitutions earlier, and I think that is a really interesting point, because it was one of the few criticisms people had of Regis last year, that he wasn't particularly proactive in changing the game from the bench. I think what we're seeing now is that probably was more a reflection at the time that he didn't really feel he had those options on the bench. And I think now that Sunderland have got a deep squad, we're seeing how good he actually is at reading the game and altering the game. And so I think yesterday was a masterclass from him, really. The only one, well, it doesn't take anything away from Regis. The one thing I would say on that is that I spoke to Reinildo after the game, and he mentioned this, and Regis himself mentioned it, is that he has a real strength in having Granit Xhaka on the pitch. Lebris described him as the second coach on the pitch. I think Granit is huge in terms of making in-game alterations, reading the game from the base of midfield, and making little tweaks on the pitch, which is not always easy for a head coach to do on the sideline. So I think Xhaka is a massive part of that story in terms of the little changes Sunderland make in a game when they're struggling. But yeah, yesterday was a fantastic day for Lebris, who is just, his reputation, you know, goes up by the day. As I said, we should name a bridge after him. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I did have more questions, but I've been going for 22 minutes, which feels more than ample. So thank you so much for sending all your questions in. Again, sorry for the slightly unusual setup here in my very small hotel room, but I hope it hasn't detracted from the video too much. We'll be back with the Raw podcast early stages this week, and then stacks of more post-match analysis and build-up heading into the Everton game. Oh, one thing I was going to mention, I did ask about Simon Adingra after the game. Obviously, he wasn't in the squad. Just a precaution. He was left out as a precaution because he was experiencing some muscle tightness in training at the back end of the week. And I think Sunderland decided just not to take any risks in case it aggravated into a proper muscle injury, which would obviously leave him out. So the early indications are he'll be fit for the Everton game. So, and that is definitely it. So thanks very much for watching as ever.